Morning, everybody. How you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I'm Sean Butler. Bugsy Malone is up in front. I'm not sure if you can see her. She's doing the things she loves to do, chasing squirrels and pigeons and things. Never catches any of them. As I said yesterday or the day before, I think that is reminiscent of Tottenham's transfer window. It doesn't end in the fashion that we would have hoped, guys. I'm absolutely exhausted. I spent all day on the streams yesterday, hoping for some fireworks at the end, not just with Tottenham but with anyone, and it never really happened. A bit of a damp squib of a window for the final 24 hours, and I guess it's time to reverse engineer our window and figure out what the correct rating would be. Also, don't forget, we've got Burnley today. That game starts in, by the time you're watching this, probably just a few hours, so keep a lookout for that. We'll be doing a live stream as always. Exciting times. Brennan Johnson won't be a part of the squad. The others that we've signed could be, probably will be. We're going to talk about that right now. Before we get into it, guys, please do me a favour, like you always do. Smash the like button for me on the video. The like game is strong with the Spurs Talk Show, guys. Please also hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. 16,400 people have gone before. Welcome back to them. Welcome to the new. Hit the notification bell and drop a comment. Let me know your thoughts on today's topic. So yesterday, I uploaded a video that had been recorded about 4 minutes before the Here We Go for Brennan Johnson. And I gave the window a 4.5 out of 10 at the time. Obviously not including Brennan Johnson. But I said, like, the pathway to get it up to a 7 or an 8 would be hopefully signing Conor Gallagher and Bella Kotchap, who were the linked players at that particular time. And neither of those two happened. In the end, I think it was naive of me to really think that Tottenham had any strong chance of signing players from a club who's a direct rival and a team that Tottenham have done very little business with in the past. William Gallas, I think, is the only memorable name of recent times. And yet we spent most of our evening yesterday hoping, fingers crossed, that we would be able to get 2 bits of business done with them. And I think it was a little bit silly of us to, or me, to think that either of them were plausible. Bella Kotchap, of course, also didn't happen. He went to PSV Eindhoven. That, to me, is the surprise trade of the window. How nobody from the Premier League was interested in him or were making moves for him, and the deals that were going to happen with him to Bayern Munich was so affordable, and the deal that eventually happened with him to PSV Eindhoven was also structured in a way which seems like a wonderful deal for the Dutch team. Anyway, getting off the point, I said it was a 4.5. I think I was probably a little bit harsh, but we need to kind of reverse engineer what a 10 out of 10 window would have looked like and then kind of chip away from there. For me, I don't think you can have a 10 out of 10 window when you sell Harry Kane. I just don't think it's plausible. When you sell your best striker, there's always going to be people that are unhappy with that scenario. And so I feel like a 9.5 is probably the highest you can ever get to. But to get there, you have to have strengthened in every single hole, every single weakness, improved your depth everywhere, and completely cleared out the deadwood. And we're nowhere near that scenario. We have, of course, improved. Veliz is someone for the future. Ash Phillips is someone for the future, which are important things to bake into the window. They're like the kind of incidental considerations. Probably gives you half points here or there, pending the structure of what you've done elsewhere. And elsewhere, I think we have very much improved the first 11. I think that Venom in goal, Vicario, looks to be too soon to tell whether he's an out-and-out improvement on the level that Hugo Lloris used to be at. But versus the level that he's become familiar, well, we've become familiar with seeing from him over the last 18 months since he signed his new contract. Thus far, I do think Vicario has improved us on his early performances. And time will tell really whether or not he is, a star. Obviously, you'll never know whether these transfer windows are a success until you can look in the hindsight, look through the rear view mirror a year down the track and see what happened with the season. But you also have to give it kind of your impression as the window closes. And for me, I'm okay with Vicario. I have my concerns about some areas of his game, but thus far he hasn't disappointed me. And I think that it was the right step in the right direction. Van der Ven, absolutely fantastic signing for me. He has all the physicalities, the abilities, and the agility that we need. And technically, he looks in very impressive form as well. So I think that there's absolutely a tick with Van der Ven. Destiny Udogie, obviously we can't really include him in this transfer window. However, he is part of the first team now for the first time. And ultimately, as I say, when you're reflecting on what the window looks like, you have to look at the team and think whether or not it's stronger now than it was last year. And if we didn't really include Destiny Udogie last year because he wasn't playing with us, now you either then consider him part of a black hole vortex that doesn't really ever get considered, or you bake him into your overall impression of whether or not we are stronger now than we were last year. And for me, I think he's one of, at least he's starting to show that he's one of the top 3 left backs in the Premier League. I can't really think of too many more. Maybe a Stupinan at Brighton, possibly Robertson at Liverpool. Manchester City's left back maybe, although they kind of swap that out. They kind of use centre backs there. So I'd say top 3 or top 4, left backs, and comparing that to who was it last year? Perisic. I think there's a massive improvement. If we are going to be including Porro and Kulusevski on the net spend, then obviously we've improved on the right back space with Pedro Porro. I personally don't think we should be including them, but it's up to you whether you think that their funds and their fees go into this window or not. I've said all summer I think I'm treating Basuma like a new signing because we didn't see him last year. He didn't fit the system, he wasn't used, and he was injured. And to me, Basuma's been absolutely incredible. And so when you consider his involvement in the team versus his absence last year, that again is absolutely a massive improvement. But I don't think we can really include him into this window. So when we're judging the transfer window, I think whilst you could possibly include Udogie, you shouldn't really be including Basuma at all. James Maddison, obviously a tick. He's going to be our creative, locksmith, and I think he's going to have to step up and find a way to get sort of double figures in both goals and assists in order to kind of minimise the impact of the loss of Harry Kane. I think Manuel Solomon, I was interested and thought it was a good piece of business when he first came in and when we saw him in pre-season. I still think he has capabilities to be able to offer things. He'll chip in with goals here and there, and he does things differently than other wide men that we have. To me, though, I just find it a little bit strange that we've gone out and bought another winger if we do value Manuel Solomon at anything other than just a cheap transfer that you had to take advantage of when the moment was there. He technically now, because of the form of Perisic, looks to me to be third choice left winger, and now that we have both Kulusevski and Brennan Johnson vying for the right side, third choice right winger. So I'm not sure if you can really call that a scoring metric on the transfer window. He gives us options, and I like him as a player, but how often is he going to be used now that we're playing one game a week? Essentially, we might even end up with 40 games this season if we get a tough tie in the third round, or even if we just don't take it seriously in the FA Cup. So Manuel Solomon, I think, is a difficult one to score because I'm not entirely sure how much time he's going to get on the pitch. And then I think the last people that you can look at then is Brennan Johnson, and like I say, to me, on paper, underwhelming, but the more I thought about it, the more I've looked into it, and the more I've kind of spoken to people that are more familiar with him than I was, I understand it now. I see more about the vision than I did when the story first broke last week, nearly 2 weeks ago. And to me, I do think he's going to provide options. I do think he can play on the right. I think he can play on the left as well, and I also think that he can play in the middle. And I think that versatility is something that I've been calling for across the team all summer. I've been talking about Gerstrida, the guy who's very versatile defender who can play right back, right-sided centre back, left-sided centre back, and then a number 6. We were looking at Conor Gallagher. One of the reasons I really liked Conor Gallagher, the idea of it was because he could play as a 6, an 8 or a 10. A complete versatile utility midfielder. And I think that those sorts of signings give you options. For me, the problem is that when you don't get a third defensive centre-back, you are paper thin and fragile. One injury away from a disaster. And I think if you've left yourself that thin, then again, it immediately takes a notch off. So the most it could be at that point is like an 8 out of 10. When you also don't replace anyone who is likely to score you a 20 goal a season, I know you're never going to be able to replace Harry Kane. Take that off the table. But if you don't go out and get an out-and-out striker who can at least chip in, then once again, I think that the number has to be chipped away from what is now a maximum 8 to a maximum 7, because you're just going to struggle to get the goals that you got last year. We've got a lot of options up front, but none of them scream 20 goals a season, and that's going to be an issue, especially if we can't reduce the amount of goals that we conceded, and there's an entirely higher possibility of that happening if the inevitable happens, which is an injury occurs to one of or both of our main centre-backs. The people behind them right now are, some decision will have to be made, but Davinson Sanchez, Eric Dyer, or Ash Phillips, or Ben Davies at a push. Ben Davies can't play left-sided centre-back. Eric Dyer has thrown his toys out of the pram and just refusing to leave. Same with Davinson Sanchez. And Ash Phillips probably isn't ready. I'm sure he's not ready. He might be better than the under-23, under-21 level, but we just don't know. And so we've left ourselves razor thin there. We've also left ourselves razor thin with the ability, in my opinion, to cover certain specific areas of the midfield. And so again, it just kind of edges away the maximum that you can be, because you've left yourself open to the variables that you can't control, which are injuries. And Tottenham always get injuries. Every team gets injuries. This time last year, we finished the window where we did, and then within 24 or 48 hours, we lost 2 strikers, 2 forwards to injuries, one of whom was Dejan Kulusevski, who was out basically for about 2 months after that. Lucas Moura also was out for a long time. And that could happen today. Touch wood, it doesn't. But against Burnley, tough team, strong tacklers. Romero goes in today too hard, breaks a toe, twists his ankle, or does a muscle strain. And again, everything falls apart. The vulnerability of that Jenga block, the tower, is incredibly strong. And that to me is where I kind of am so frustrated. But you know what? The reason why the window can't be any higher than a 7 is also because of the outgoings. I think we have improved many places in the team. We have made some really astute signings, especially in Van der Ven and Maddison. I'm excited for Brennan Johnson. I'd like to see players that are young, that are homegrown, that are pacey and tricky and can invoke the fear in defenders when running at them. We'll see how it goes. A lot of pressure on his shoulders like there was on Van der Ven and Maddison. Those two have stepped up. We'll see what Brennan Johnson can do. Vicario, I think, has also stepped up, and so I think that most of the signings that we've seen so far have been successes. But the problem is, of course, we can't get more players in. We couldn't get more players in, absent making room in the squad. And for whatever reason, 5 or 6 players in our team have just decided to dig their heels in the sand, almost in protest, almost in unison, like they've been speaking to each other and saying, don't you go, I won't go, none of us leave, we're all going to get our contracts torn up. And that's Hugo Lloris, Ndombele, Sanchez, Eric Dyer. Those 4. You can make a couple of others, cases for a couple of others as well. Pierre Mahoybier towards the end. And these players refusing to leave created the bottleneck that made it impossible for us to bring the players in. To me, that is where the lion's share of the blame goes. As much as Daniel Levy could have gone a different direction, could have got this stuff done earlier, much as Joe Lewis could have put his hands in his pocket and shown some ambition, injected the cash into the club to be able to enable some contracts to be torn up and then force the issue, then the outcome might have been different. But ultimately, it wasn't through lack of effort that we couldn't bring new players in. We didn't bring new players in. It was because there was no room and no ability to force these guys out of the door. They didn't have to accept any of the deals that were coming their way, and none of them did. Hugo Lloris is now 5th choice goalkeeper for a team that plays maybe 40 games this season. He turned down moves to Newcastle where he could have sat on the bench in the Champions League. He turned down moves to go home to France. He turned down moves to big teams in Italy. You know, it's weird to me, very strange behaviour. He wants his contract torn up almost petulantly, almost in defiance. Maybe all of that story about what happened at Newcastle when he did throw his shirt, to the ground and walk off the pitch. All of that seems to be true, and his reaction to the reaction from the fans to that assertion is to put his middle finger up. Eric Dyer, stubborn stain, refusing to leave. He wants his payout. He wants his new contract, his final contract, to be juicy with a nice sign-on fee. Davinson Sanchez didn't want to go. Ndombele didn't want to go. These guys, to me, have formed some sort of pact where they're all waiting for Daniel Levy to tear up the first contract, because once you tear up one, you're probably going to tear up them all. And to those of you who think that we should have done that anyway in order to be able to give the club what they needed, to give Ange what they needed, if you have to tear up all of the contracts of Lloris, Dyer, Sanchez and Ndombele, just as an example, that would be the equivalent of about 50, 60 million quid. And in so doing, you've expunged and exposed all of the budget. Your cash flow forecasting goes out of the window. You become totally illiquid, and you leave yourself with no opportunity then to spend the money on the players that you were hoping that you could get in if those players had left in the first place. So it was a catch-22. It was never going to work either way. And I think that is where the frustration mainly should be. You can, of course, add your frustration at the owners for not putting the money in separately to be able to allow that to happen, for not withdrawing that £50 million. 100%, there's question marks there. You can absolutely ask question marks around what was going on with the Davinson Sanchez deal, if it was true that in actual fact we'd agreed a deal for 12 million with Spartak Moscow that was then turned down by the player and then rejected a bid of 12 million pound from Rennes. If that's true, question marks have to be asked, but not sure if that is true or if that's just reports from the ITKs or from the clickbaits. There's question marks to be asked everywhere. As always, there's a pizza pie of blame. I am not absconding or absolving any of the blame on the ownership. They made their bed with regards previous decisions, signing these players up to long contracts on stupid money when the finance in football had turned and was seemingly going in a different direction, and has now left us in a scenario where you have greedy, stubborn players not wanting to go anywhere and digging their heels in. That is in no small part on the owners, but let's also not throw the baby out with the bathwater on our own analysis, and don't also hold them accountable for holding back the club. They didn't want to care about their season. They didn't want to care about their career. They cared about their money, which is fine, and they're entitled to do it. But for me, the lion's share of the frustration of a sloppy end to the window has come from the inability to move players on because of their lack of willingness to take pride in their own career at this stage and put money ahead of progress. To me, I feel like Ange has enough in the first 11 to be okay. If we get an injury to one of 4 or 5 key players for any length of time, we might just be able to scrape through. But if we get 2 or 3 at the same time, then I think we are in a lot of trouble. I'd also say though, guys, let's not forget the expectations that we placed on this transitional period only a couple of months ago. If you were someone like me that said I have no expectations, I'm putting to bed this idea of a cup for a minute and European qualification, I just want to see good football and progress and momentum, and we can build this project because Rome wasn't built in a day. If you were saying that 2 months ago, then that shouldn't change because we've had a decent start to the season. You should still be of the same mindset, and I think we are still capable of playing some great football and making some improvements and making some waves in this league this year with what we have. Just pray to the gods that we get fortunate with injuries. And you know what? You're right to feel frustrated. You're right to feel aggravated with many different parts of who's responsible here. And ultimately for me, when you factor all of that stuff in, I land with the window being about a 6 out of 10. It was never going to be perfect. It couldn't be perfect with Harry Kane leaving. But when you finish up with a net spend of around 40 million, if you discount the Porro money and the Kulusevski money, then it also doesn't show the level of ambition that you hope from the owners. But again, bottlenecked by the lack of willingness for other players to leave the club. It's a quagmire of complexity. Let me know your thoughts, guys. What did you land on it? I'll let you go. Like, subscribe and comment. And as always, I'll see you in the Burnley game. Bye-bye.